My daughter looked me in the eye and said, "I don't owe you anything." Those were the first words that tore through the quiet of my kitchen that morning. The sunlight was coming in through the window, catching the steam from her coffee cup. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. After all, this was the same girl I'd carried in my arms when her mother passed, the same one I used to wake up early for, making her breakfast before school. But her tone, cold, detached, left no room for misunderstanding. I asked softly, "What did you just say?" She didn't even blink. I said, "I don't owe you anything, Dad. Not money, not time, not explanations. I've got my own life now." It was strange how silence can ring louder than shouting. I just stood there, my hand resting on the kitchen counter, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest like a stone. I tried to remind myself that she'd been under stress lately. New job, new place, that man she'd started seeing. But something in her voice wasn't stress. It was distance. I wanted to tell her that I never wanted repayment, that all I ever wanted was respect, maybe a visit now and then. But before I could speak, she was already gathering her purse and keys. "Don't start this again," she said. "You always make me feel guilty, and I'm done with that." The front door closed before I could find the right words. The sound of it echoed longer than it should have. I sat down at the table where we used to share Sunday breakfast. The chairs still faced the same way, her favorite mug still in the cabinet. It's funny how ordinary things can become evidence of something broken. I thought about the time she begged me to co-sign for her first apartment, and how proud she'd been when I said yes. She had promised then, "I'll pay you back, Dad." I told her she didn't have to. I guess that's the part she remembered most. Only now she'd turned it into a declaration of independence. My mind wandered to the years that built her life. The part-time jobs I took after retirement to help her through college, the nights I drove through storms to get her home from work. None of it was about money. It was about duty, love, the kind of invisible debt that only parents understand. I used to believe gratitude was something you didn't need to ask for. But as I sat there, staring at the quiet house, I realized that's not always true. Some debts get erased in the minds of those who never carried them. A small envelope lay unopened on the counter, some paperwork she'd left for me to sign. Something about her mortgage, she'd said last week. I hadn't paid it much attention then. Now, looking at her quick scrawl on the front, something inside me shifted. There was a strange chill in my gut, as if her words had unlocked a different kind of truth I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just about attitude. It was about something bigger, I whispered to myself. The debt was never about money. The words sounded foreign at first, but they lingered. Maybe because deep down, I knew they were the truth. She thought I wanted repayment in dollars. What I really wanted was acknowledgement. A simple thank you. A sign that all those years hadn't vanished into nothing. I looked toward the door again, half expecting her to come back. She didn't, and for the first time, I felt the distance between us wasn't measured in miles or years. It was measured in respect that had quietly died. Have you ever been told your sacrifices meant nothing? When her mother passed, Emily was only 11. I remember the way she clung to my coat at the funeral, her small hand trembling in mine. I told her then, "You don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of you." I meant it with everything I had, even though I had no idea how hard that promise would be to keep. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house near the edge of town. The roof leaked every winter, and the heater rattled like it was begging for mercy. I worked as a night clerk at the hardware store, taking overtime whenever someone called in sick. During the day, I packed lunches, washed uniforms, and tried to keep the house running. There were weeks I barely slept, just so she could go to her piano lessons or afford the field trip she didn't want to miss. Sometimes I'd come home and find her asleep on the couch, the TV still playing those old cartoons. I used to watch for a moment before turning off the lights, thinking to myself that all the exhaustion was worth it. A father's job, I told myself, was to carry the weight so his child could run without stumbling. When she got into college, I cried. She hugged me and said, "You did it, Dad." I corrected her, "No, you did." But truthfully, I felt like we both had. I took out a small loan to cover what her scholarship didn't. It wasn't much, but for someone on a fixed income, it might as well have been a mountain. I didn't mind. I thought one day she'd look back and understand what those years cost me, not in money, but in time, in health, in quiet sacrifices no one ever saw. In the beginning, she called every week. She'd tell me about classes, her friends, the city lights she loved. But after graduation, something changed. The calls became shorter. Then came the texts, shorter still. Finally, the silence. I used to tell myself she was just busy, but the truth is, she was drifting away, one unanswered message at a time. When she started working at that accounting firm, I was proud. She bought herself a new car and told me she was finally independent. I smiled and said I was happy for her, though deep down, the word stung. Independence shouldn't mean forgetting who held you when you couldn't stand. Looking back now, I see the signs I ignored, the small lies about her finances, the way she redirected conversations when I asked about her boyfriend's business. Once, she asked if I'd ever thought about putting the house in her name, just to make things easier, she said. I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. I see now it wasn't a joke. It was the first soft knock on the door of something darker. Still, I told myself to trust her. She was my daughter, the same little girl who once wrote me Father's Day cards with crayon hearts. You don't look for betrayal in those eyes. You look for love, and you convince yourself it's still there, even when it's fading. Now, when I think about that time, I feel two things at once: pride and sorrow. Pride that I kept my word and gave her the life she wanted. Sorrow that in doing so, I may have taught her that love was something to take, not return. Maybe that's the unpaid debt, what we give freely, thinking it'll be remembered forever, only to realize later it's been forgotten, replaced by entitlement and coldness. It started with a letter from the bank. Nothing alarming at first. Just one of those thin envelopes marked important account information. I opened it while sitting at the kitchen table, expecting the usual statement, but the numbers didn't look right. There was a new account listed under my name, one I didn't remember opening. My heart beat slower, heavier as I scanned it again, thinking maybe my eyesight was failing. It wasn't. The signature at the bottom, my name, but not my handwriting, stopped me cold. I went to the drawer where I kept all my papers. Mortgage, insurance, savings. I'd always been careful, almost to a fault. But when I flipped through the folders, I noticed a few missing. The file for the home equity line was gone. So was the notarized copy of my will. My stomach tightened. I could hear the old clock ticking behind me, each second stretching longer than it should. I called Emily. She picked up after the second ring, her voice light, distracted. "Hey, Dad, what's up? Did you take some of my papers?" I asked. "The ones from the drawer?" She laughed a little too quickly. "Oh, that. Yeah, I grabbed a few things last week when I stopped by. I needed to check something for the mortgage. You said it was fine." "I said it was fine," I repeated. "Of course," she said, her tone flattening. "You probably forgot. Don't worry, I'll handle it." I didn't forget. I never said that. The call ended with her assuring me she'd sort it out, but the sound of her voice lingered, sharp, impatient. Not the daughter I used to know. That night, I sat at the desk and tried to piece things together. There was a new joint account listed, one that gave her full access. Another letter mentioned an authorization form signed with my name. I could almost see the pen strokes. Too rushed, too smooth. I'd signed thousands of documents in my lifetime. I knew how my hand moved. This one wasn't mine. A few days later, she came by, her boyfriend in tow. His name was Ryan. Tall, confident, the kind of man who smiled without warmth. He shook my hand too firmly, the way people do when they're trying to assert control. "We're helping you get things organized," he said. "You've got a lot of accounts open. It's confusing at your age." At my age, the words hit harder than he probably realized. Emily didn't correct him. She just smiled faintly, as if it were true. I asked for my documents back. She said they were being reviewed. When I pressed further, Ryan cut in. "You should be grateful, sir. She's just trying to protect your assets." "Protect them from who? From me?" After they left, I sat in the quiet again, listening to the sound of the refrigerator hum. Something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel just betrayed anymore. I felt watched, like every decision I made, every piece of paper I touched, was being measured against a plan I didn't know existed. I pulled open another drawer and found one of the old folders tucked in the back. Inside, an authorization form, my name, dated 3 weeks ago. But I hadn't held a pen that day. That's when it hit me. She'd been planning this for longer than I'd wanted to believe. It wasn't an accident, not confusion, not carelessness. This was deliberate. The next morning, I called the bank to freeze my accounts. The woman on the phone hesitated when I gave my name. "Sir," she said gently, "your daughter is listed as your power of attorney." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The air went out of the room. Power of attorney. Those were words that meant control. Control I never granted. That was the moment I knew something was deeply wrong. The first time I realized I was no longer in control of my own life was at the bank. I went in to withdraw a small amount, cash for groceries, nothing more. The teller smiled politely, then asked for my daughter's approval. Her approval. My name was still on the account, but the system showed a restriction, as if I were a guest, not the owner. I felt the room tilt slightly, my balance shifting. The teller's voice softened. "It says here your daughter handles your finances now, Mr. Bennett." I remember forcing a small laugh, pretending it was all a mistake. I walked out with empty hands, but the real emptiness was inside me. When I called Emily to ask what was going on, she sighed like a parent speaking to a stubborn child. "Dad, it's just temporary. You've been forgetting things lately, and the bank needed someone listed who could help manage things." "Forgetting things?" I repeated. "I'm not forgetting anything." "See?" she said, her tone flat. "You're getting defensive again." That word, defensive, wasn't one I ever thought would be used against me by my own daughter. I started noticing other changes too. The mail stopped coming directly to the house. Bills were forwarded somewhere else. When I asked the post office, they said my forwarding address had been updated by my authorized representative. That phrase burned in my mind for days. Soon after, she started showing up less often, but her control grew stronger. Neighbors stopped by less too. When I ran into my old friend Mark at the grocery store, he gave me a puzzled look. "Emily said you've been having trouble remembering things," he said carefully. "If you ever need anything..." I cut him off before he could finish. That's how it spreads, I realized. One rumor at a time, until everyone believes you're losing your mind. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being erased. She changed the locks a few weeks later, claiming it was for safety. I still had my key, but it no longer worked. When I called, Ryan answered instead of her. "Emily's resting," he said. "You should really stop worrying about things you can't handle anymore." "I want to talk to my daughter," I said. "She'll call you," he replied, and hung up. She never did. That night, I sat in my car outside the house, watching the light in the living room flicker. It was still my home. My name was on every brick of it. But I was standing outside like a stranger. I could see Ryan moving around inside, holding a glass of wine. My daughter sat on the couch, laughing at something he said. For the first time, I understood how easy it is for people to disappear without ever leaving. I started writing things down, dates, conversations, every detail I could remember. A small notebook became my lifeline. If they wanted to call me forgetful, I'd give them proof that I wasn't. I made copies of what few papers I still had and stored them at the library in a public locker. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Weeks passed. My phone calls went unanswered. Even my doctor seemed distant when I tried to explain. "It's normal at your age to be confused about legal documents," he said kindly. I wanted to shout that I wasn't confused, that confusion was exactly what they wanted people to believe. But I stayed quiet. I'd learned that when the world starts doubting you, raising your voice only proves them right. Still, something in me refused to give up. Every night, I'd open that notebook and reread my own handwriting just to remind myself that I still existed. I still remembered. I was still me. That was my small rebellion. Not screaming, not fighting, just surviving long enough to be believed again. It was Mrs. Palmer, my neighbor from across the street, who first noticed something was wrong. She'd been bringing my mail to the porch since I stopped getting it delivered directly. One morning, she knocked and asked if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine, just tired. Her eyes said she didn't believe me. "You should know," she said quietly. "A man came by last week, asking questions about your house. He said your daughter was handling everything now." Her words tightened something in my chest. Later that week, there was another knock on my door. This time, a woman in a gray jacket flashing a badge that read, "Adult Protective Services." She introduced herself as Investigator Lawson. Her voice was calm, even kind, but I could tell she'd already heard a version of the story that wasn't mine. "I just want to make sure you're being treated fairly, Mr. Bennett," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "Your daughter mentioned some confusion about your finances." I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not confused," I said, "but someone wants the world to think I am." She didn't dismiss me. That alone made me feel a flicker of relief. She asked if she could look over some paperwork, so I brought out the small box where I kept my remaining documents. There wasn't much left, but I'd kept copies of the forged signatures, the bank letters, even notes about every call I'd made. She examined each page carefully. When she reached the signature on one of the forms, she frowned. "Did you sign this?" No, I said, but that's my name. She compared it to another form, one I had signed years earlier. The difference was clear, even to the untrained eye. That's concerning, she murmured, and began taking photos of the documents with her phone. For the first time in months, I felt something like validation. Not hope yet, but the faint idea that maybe the truth had a chance. She asked about my daughter and her partner. I told her everything, how the accounts were changed, how my mail was rerouted, how they told others I was forgetful. My voice shook only once, when I mentioned the night I sat outside my own house. Lawson didn't interrupt. She just took notes, occasionally nodding, her face tightening in quiet disbelief. When she stood to leave, she said, "You did the right thing keeping records. Most people don't think to do that. I'll be following up with the financial institutions and your doctor. If what you're saying checks out, this could qualify as exploitation." The word hung in the air like a sentence. Exploitation. It wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was a crime. A few days later, she came back with another man, a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit. They asked for permission to access my accounts. I hesitated for a moment. It felt like giving away the last bit of privacy I had, but I nodded. "If it proves what they did," I said, "take whatever you need." They showed me copies of transactions made in my name, cash withdrawals, wire transfers to an account connected to Ryan's business. One was for a car, another for a down payment on a condo. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. "She used my money," I whispered. "She used me." The detective glanced at me. "We see this more than you'd think," he said quietly, "but it's rare someone has as much documentation as you do." That night, I sat in the same chair I'd once felt trapped in, but this time, the air felt different. I wasn't powerless anymore. Someone believed me. The isolation hadn't been for nothing. Every note, every record, every sleepless night had built a small path out of the dark. For the first time in a long while, I slept through the night. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, a mix that somehow made the air feel colder. I sat on the wooden bench, waiting for my name to be called, watching people move through the hallway with quiet urgency. I never thought I'd see my daughter in a place like this. Standing trial, her name printed on a charge sheet next to words like fraud and exploitation. When the clerk called State vs. Emily Bennett, my legs felt heavy. I followed the investigator, Ms. Lawson, into the courtroom. Emily was already seated beside her attorney. She looked polished, calm, almost detached, like she was attending a business meeting instead of a hearing about betraying her father. Ryan sat behind her, arms crossed, expression smug. The prosecutor began by outlining the charges: unauthorized transfers, forged signatures, misuse of a power of attorney. Each word cut through me like a slow knife. I heard my name mentioned again and again. The victim, the account holder, the father. It felt strange, being described like a stranger in my own story. When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt the room narrow. My hands trembled as I placed them on the rail. The lawyer asked me to explain what happened. I spoke as clearly as I could, my voice steady even when my throat burned. "I trusted my daughter," I said. "I gave her access to help me, not to take from me. I didn't sign those documents. I didn't authorize those accounts. I believed she was looking out for me, the way I once looked out for her." The courtroom stayed silent except for the soft scratching of pens. The prosecutor handed me a document, one of the forged authorizations. My name sat there in ink that wasn't mine. I confirmed it. Then came the defense. Her attorney smiled like he was talking to a child. "Mr. Bennett," he said gently, "you're 74, correct? Would you say your memory has declined in recent years?" I looked right at him. "No," I said. "I remember every dollar I worked for and every lie she told." He tried to trip me up with dates and details, but I had my notebook, the one I'd started when all of this began. I flipped it open, reading each line calmly. The entries matched the evidence exactly. The judge watched closely, eyes narrowing with quiet respect. When the bank manager testified next, everything came into focus. He explained how Emily had submitted power of attorney forms bearing my forged signature, then transferred funds into accounts under her control. The investigator presented statements showing large withdrawals matching deposits in Ryan's business. The paper trail was undeniable. Emily shifted in her seat for the first time. Her hands fidgeted, her jaw tightening as the truth unfolded in front of her. When the prosecutor read out the total amount stolen, $216,000, her composure cracked. She shook her head, muttering, "That's not true." He told me I could manage it. I felt something twist inside me, but not anger this time, just sorrow, because even now, she couldn't tell the truth. The judge called for silence. "Ms. Bennett," he said, his voice steady, "the evidence presented shows deliberate exploitation. Your father's records, verified signatures, and your own financial statements prove a pattern of deceit. This court finds you guilty." Emily's face crumpled then. Tears fell, but not the kind that come from remorse, more like disbelief that the mask had finally slipped. As the bailiff led her away, she turned once toward me, eyes wide with something I couldn't read. Maybe anger, maybe shame. I wanted to feel relief, but it didn't come right away. Justice doesn't erase betrayal. It only exposes it under bright, unflinching light. When the judge dismissed me, I stood, my legs stiff. The investigator gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. I walked out into the hallway, the sound of the gavel still echoing behind me, and wondered quietly, would you forgive your own child after something like this? Sentencing day came quietly, without the noise I expected. There were no reporters, no crowd, just a few people seated in the back, neighbors maybe, or courthouse staff who'd heard about the case. I sat alone in the front row. Emily was led in by an officer, wrists free but shoulders tight. She didn't look at me, not once. The judge spoke for a long time, his voice steady and deliberate. "Elder exploitation is not a misunderstanding," he said. "It is a deliberate act of greed, and it destroys the foundation of trust that holds families together." His words carried no anger, just weight. He recited the amounts taken, the forged documents, the evidence of manipulation. I kept my eyes fixed on the table in front of me, afraid that if I looked at her, I might still see the child I once loved. When he pronounced the sentence, 4 years in state prison, restitution ordered, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt hollow. Justice, I realized, doesn't always feel like victory. It feels like standing at the edge of something broken and knowing there's no way to rebuild it. Emily didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood there, lips pressed tight, eyes glazed with a mixture of pride and disbelief. When the bailiff placed a hand on her shoulder to guide her away, she finally turned toward me. For a second, I thought she might say something, but all she gave me was silence. Cold, sharp silence that cut deeper than any words could. The prosecutor gathered her papers and nodded to me politely. Ms. Lawson, the investigator, placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed her. Right and wrong feel simple until they divide a family. After the courtroom emptied, I sat there alone. The room seemed too large, too bright. I thought about the years that led here, the nights I worked late to pay her tuition, the afternoons fixing her first car, the letters she used to leave on my pillow saying she loved me. All of that now sat in the shadow of this moment, erased by greed I still couldn't understand. Outside, it had started to rain. I waited on the courthouse steps, watching drops hit the stone, each one breaking into smaller pieces before disappearing. It felt fitting. That's what family becomes when betrayal enters, something that breaks and can't quite come back together again. Ryan wasn't there that day. He'd already taken a plea deal, traded testimony for leniency. He was the kind who'd always land on his feet, even if it meant stepping on someone else to do it. Emily must have realized that too late. Before I left, I looked once more through the glass as they led her down the hallway. She didn't look back this time. The sound of her footsteps faded, leaving only the echo of what used to be a bond between us. People tell you that justice brings peace. Maybe it does, but peace is quiet, and quiet can be unbearable. The truth is, I didn't want revenge. I wanted understanding. I wanted her to admit what she'd done, to say she knew how deeply it hurt, but she never did. As I drove home, the seat beside me felt emptier than ever. The house I'd once built for her waited in silence, a reminder of both love and loss. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and sat at the same table where everything began. Justice had been served, but love, that part of the sentence, will never be carried out. The house is quiet again, not the kind of quiet that follows sleep or rest. This one feels heavier, like it's been earned through too much noise and too much pain. It's been months since the sentencing, and yet I still find myself setting 2 plates on the table out of habit before realizing there's no one left to join me. I spend most mornings by the window now, watching the same street I've lived on for 40 years. The neighbors wave, kind but cautious, as if they're not sure whether to feel sorry or relieved that justice was done. I don't blame them. I wouldn't know what to say to me either. People keep asking if I feel closure. It's a strange word. Closure sounds clean, like something that can be boxed up and put away. But the truth is, some debts don't close. They linger quietly in the spaces between what was done and what can never be undone. For a long time, I thought debt was measured in dollars, signatures, and account balances. That's what made this whole ordeal so cruel. It twisted something sacred into something transactional. But the real debt between parent and child was never about money. It was about love given freely and expected to return in the smallest of ways: respect, time, acknowledgement. When that doesn't come back, it leaves a wound that no court can repair. Sometimes I still see her in my mind the way she used to be, barefoot on the back porch, laughing as she fed the stray cats, or sitting on the living room floor while I helped her with school projects. Those moments feel like they belonged to a different lifetime, one where the word family still meant trust. The restitution checks arrive every month now. The state handles them automatically. I never cash them. They sit unopened in a drawer beside my old photographs. It's not defiance, it's clarity. No amount of money could repay what was taken, because what was stolen wasn't just wealth. It was time, memory, and the simple faith that kindness would be remembered. Sometimes, late at night, I still write her letters. I never send them. They start with things like, "I hope you're eating well," or "The garden bloomed early this year." Then they trail off into silence, because I can't find words that balance love and disappointment in the same sentence. I've come to realize that forgiveness isn't always something you give to someone else. Sometimes it's what you offer yourself, to stop carrying the weight of what you couldn't prevent. I forgive myself for trusting her, for believing the best long after I saw the worst. I walk every morning now, slow but steady, past the courthouse, the post office, the park. I see other families laughing, holding hands, arguing about small things that will be forgotten by dinner. I used to envy them. Now I just wish them well. They still have what I lost, a bond unbroken. The world didn't end when she betrayed me. It just became quieter, more honest. I live with what happened, not in bitterness, but in understanding. The price of love, I've learned, isn't measured by what you give. It's measured by what remains when everything else is gone. If you've listened to this far, maybe you understand something about that kind of debt, the one written in years, in sacrifices no one sees, in love that outlasts betrayal. So I'll ask you what I ask myself most nights. Was justice enough, or is the debt between parent and child something no court can ever settle?